This is Ed Gray of the Commish Radio Show podcast, the best radio podcast show from Como to the Congo. If you live in Fort Worth, you know where Como's at. If you're part of the world, which clearly you are, clearly you are, you know and you should know where the Congo's at. And if you don't know, you need to ask somebody. You know, this show is loved by many, hated by few, respected by all, second to none. And we are talking about U.S. Congressional District 30. That's right, U.S. Congressional District 30, one of the hottest races that's going on in Texas right now. That's right, Texas. So today we have a special guest, and we normally have these shows on Saturday, but they out campaigning hard, they out knocking on doors and everything like that. But we had one of the congressional candidates decided on this day of early voting to stop knocking on doors, to come talk to you here on the Commish Radio Show. So that being said, we have Dr. James Rodgers. He is running for U.S. Congressional District 30, which is the seat held currently by Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson. Dr. Rodgers, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Love being out here. Excited about early voting starting.
Man, well, I'm excited about having you here, man.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited about having you here. I'm very thrilled to have you here because we have done a lot of interviews with congressional candidates before. Example, Colin Allred. He was on here before he actually became Congressman Colin Allred, and we also had Mark Vesey, Congressman Mark Vesey, and Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson's been on the show as well. And so we had a lot of great people come on that have been elected to Congress, and hopefully we will have someone out of the 4 candidates that are running for Congress right now to be on the show. Because you're on the show today.
I am, yeah.
And Jane Hope Hamilton has been on the show before.
Yeah.
And the opponent that's running in your side of the House, so to speak, Republican opponent, he hasn't been on the show.
No.
And well, you know, he hasn't been on the show.
That's okay. I mean, I can talk you into an endorsement.
Well, you know,
in the primary.
But and for Jane Hope Hamilton is on the Democrat side.
Yes.
And Jasmine Crockett, State Representative Jasmine Crockett, she's been asked several times to, come to the show. She's done it before, state rep. Maybe, hopefully, we can get her to come on before.
She's hard to find these days.
Very hard to find. I
haven't seen her much these days.
So you was at the South Oak Cliff. What
the NAACP.
You was at the NAACP?
Yeah, of course. It was great. Candidate forum.
The candidate forum, NAACP?
Yeah, Miss Hamilton and I represented each side of her because, as you said, Miss Crockett's missing, and my opponent was busy too, I guess. So we got up there, got to the NAACP forum, and had just some great discussions because at this point in the primary process is not really combative. She's trying to be the best representative of those that share that Democratic side of the aisle, and I'm doing the same thing on the Republican. So it was really complimentary. I doubt if we have to do a real debate in the general, it's going to be as friendly, but
well, y'all appear to be nice to each other.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah,
I mean, because you don't have to face each other.
No, and she's so nice. It makes it hard. You want people that you don't like, so you can feel like you're the good guy in the story. So
well, that's the way stories are always done. You know. So, Congressional District 30,
yes.
Explain to the folks where Congressional District 30 is at.
So, Congressional District 30 is essentially the south part of Dallas County, and then it seeps into a little piece of Tarrant County, but it goes from Grand Prairie in the southwest all the way over to Hutchins, up to the south part of Mesquite, cut through the Park Cities, over to that little bit of the back into Grand Prairie, and that's a giant map. It goes through Fair Park, Cedar Hill, Duncanville. Obviously, Oak Cliff is a big component of that. Lancaster, where I live. Just so many different neighborhoods and cities. And man, when you're out driving it, knocking on doors, you realize just how big it is. It looked more reasonable on the map. I don't know.
Why do we have maps like that? That's not. It doesn't appear to be contiguous at all. Since we were talking about. That was one of those big words. When it was contiguous, and because when you have a title like you, Dr. James, that's the reason why I use contiguous, because you have a title Like doctor, I figure you'd be able to understand what I'm
you
saying.
take out as much student loans as I do, you
that's
better,
the reason why I went
know
back to school, just so I could do that, right?
Exactly.
I didn't want to pay it back, so you got to defer it.
Exactly.
You know, I don't know how many times I can keep getting degrees though. To do
No,
this.
well, I ran out because my wife said I wasn't going to be able to. I thought about going and getting another master's, and
How many do you have?
I have 3. I just have 3.
You
but
just have 3.
Yeah, but I was going to go back and get another master's.
You just have 3. That's like how many kids you have?
We just
You
had
just
2.
had 2.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just had
What you
number
have?
2. Yeah, I had a boy.
A boy? What's your name? What did you both name him?
We named him Logan, and he is a gigantic specimen from what the doctors said he measured. He came a week early and still was almost 8 inches, or almost 8 pounds and 23 or 24 inches. I can't remember. So a big kid for what he is, but yeah, it's going great. Mom is pulling a little extra while I'm out doing the campaign stuff like here, and the toddler is decided she needs far more attention now that there's a new rival. So we're balancing all that, you know.
And how old is the toddler?
Toddler, it just turned 2. So
Yeah, when you use words like toddler, we know they're not like going to
she's-
school like that.
No. She's wobbling around the house, drinking chocolate milk.
Drinking chocolate milk.
Yeah.
All right.
It's the life.
Let's talk about you running for Congress. When I refer to it as Dr. Rodgers, I refer to Mr. Rodgers' neighborhood.
Yeah.
Your neighborhood is Lancaster.
My neighborhood is Lancaster. Yeah,
It's Lancaster or Lancaster? Which one is it?
I say Lancaster.
Okay, you know you live in Lancaster.
Yeah, I know.
You got to say, you got to be.
I do. I wait for what I do is I knock on the door, and however they say it is what I do. So if they say Lancaster, I go, well, I'm from Lancaster.
Yeah, because you say Lancaster, it's
And
like
people, yeah.
you must not be from here.
They know that I'm giving away my Waco roots. They're
Yeah.
like, this is one of those wacky.
So
Waco guys.
you grew up in Waco?
I grew up in Waco. Yeah, Waco, Texas.
Okay.
Before Chip and Joanna were there.
All right.
That's not true. They were at the same time, but.
So where'd you go to school at?
I went to Parkview Christian Academy, and I always tell this story because it's really vital to part of who I am. And people hear that I went to private school, and so they assume I grew up with money. I did not. My parents did not have money and means, but they did not want my brother and I to have to go to the Waco public schools. So my mom, who was a nurse, worked out this deal where she would, after she got off her night shift as a nurse, would go to the private school at Parkview and work as a janitor. So allowed me and my brother to attend. And you may find this hard to believe. A bunch of private school kids are not always nice to the kids they know are the janitor's sons and daughter. We didn't have a daughter, but so that was really informed kind of the way I looked at education and why I got into schools and things like that. That and I was going to be the next Tom Landry, as every boy who grows
You
up.
really telling your age, Tom Landry.
Well, yeah, come on.
I
wasn't going to grow up and say Jimmy Johnson.
I like Jimmy Johnson.
I like him too, but he replaced Tom Landry. So
okay,
that's.
I'm sorry, man.
You don't have to apologize to me.
You just Tom. Tom is cool, but you know, Jimmy's
Jimmy
my
over Tom.
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is blowing my mind.
Well, just as much as blowing my mind about you running for Congress, and you're a Republican in what is considered to be a black Democratic district.
Yes.
Okay. Why?
Why?
You could have moved somewhere else.
Yeah.
And you know.
I could have, but this is my neighborhood. This is where I live.
That's why we call it Mr. Rodgers' neighborhood.
Exactly. This is where I go, jogging with my kids in the stroller. This is where we grocery shop. Well, no, that's not true. This is the.
You can't grocery shop. Food deserts there.
I go down to HEB and walk. So you got me on that.
Yeah.
I do. I go to walk.
You watch the show before you know it's gonna be like this.
Okay, so yeah, but this is our neighborhood. This is where we eat. This is where we play and we grow. And when I look around at the issues, whether it's in our country or at our state level or at our community level, I think the same thing is true. Which is the old Edmund Burke quote, which is evil prevails when good men do nothing. And I always say not to be sexist, so good men and women in the modern age. But what I did is I looked around and I felt like the extremes were driving the cars in both parties, and that sensible solutions were being ignored for reasons I couldn't quite grasp. I think I have a little better handle on them now that I'm getting into the political foray. But no, I see these problems and solutions that seem that they would, reach across party lines and across economic lines and racial lines, and yet no one brings them up. No one sits there and does it. Or when they discuss them in ways that rile people up as opposed to solution-oriented thinking. And so I kept saying these things over and over, and finally my wife said, look, I'm trying to watch The Real Housewives of Atlanta. Either get up and do something about this or shut up. And I don't shut up, hence why I'm on the radio with you. So I got up, signed up, and here I am in the midst of this race. People have liked the ideas. We've done a little bit different approach, all grassroots. We're going into the inner city. We're not just sticking to the Republican hubs, and hence why you and I hooked up with after I was at the NAACP. Because you're not going to win. You don't flip a district by just sticking to what the usual, right? You flip it through preaching something as an agent of change. You know, Obama and Reagan came in as these agents of change. That's who I kind of read up on a lot when I look at these campaigns of, because there's not like Dallas County is, you know, Tehran or in some third world nation, but it's lagging behind the other communities, especially educational and economically. And for me, when I see that, and I know my kids are going to go to these schools, and you know they're going to want to live, and I want them to be able to get jobs here and thrive, and just like you know the students I worked with in those Title I schools, you know, which was my background. There's no place to go if there's no place to go, right? You can't sit there and say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps if there's no place to walk with your boots, right? There's got to be jobs at the end of the other side of that education, and so that's been kind of the two pillars of what I've harped on.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
You a Republican?
I am.
You don't sound like one.
I don't. Well, I don't know. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
No, I mean, you know, this is not just what, you know, that don't sound like no Republican.
Okay. Well, what is it?
I mean, because well, all right, let's talk.
We can shoot straight here.
That's what we're going to do.
Okay.
All right, so I wish that we could just rewind that back like that, but you had said pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Basically, there's no bootstraps to pull yourself up. That's a Martin Luther King quote.
Right. That was and I was having a discussion with a friend of mine that actually kind of spurred this kind of line of thinking, which is a lot of times we focus on one issue and one solution, and you know you can't fix just the economics, right? You can't bring in a bunch of jobs to a historically impoverished neighborhood and you haven't educated their children, right? And you've ignored their children, and then their children, and then you say, well, why are they turning to crime and not getting these jobs? And it's the same way the other way, right? You can't have good schools and then nowhere to go. It's a married process, and that's the only way you revive communities is both economically and you empower them, right? When you have educated, economically thriving class, they have to be heard. They have influence and they have might and in the political and you know social landscape, and that's needed for a lot of these communities that are, for lack of a better term, strapped in the cycle of poverty, and that's in the inner city and our rural communities.
Now you sound like what Republicans used to sound like when I was literally a kid. I mean literally a kid, like in the 1960s and the early 70s. Coming up, when you had people, I'll tell my age again, Steve Bartlett, who used to be the mayor of Dallas, who became a congressman, I believe in the 5th Congressional District. I can't recall which district it is, but that's the type of Republican he was. He was able to walk on both sides of the street without having anyone throw rocks on him from the other side of the street.
Right.
So how are you able to navigate this by being a Republican and espousing this type of language that you have right now?
I think, well, it's two sides of the street, right? So and I'm going to be real specific with what I say. So my philosophy, and that's the reason I put
this type of language. Hold on.
Oh, it's okay.
I was trying to make sure I had everything that you said where I could quote you right, so go ahead.
No, so looking at the both sides of the street, I think there's two keys to this, and you have to be honest in when you assess things. So on the one side of the street, like I put on the card there, I put conservative, right? I didn't put Republican.
No, I know.
And the reason is because people fundamentally had this instant either recoil or they wanted to latch on to me before they'd even heard what I'd say. And so I didn't want that. I wanted people to say, I'm a conservative and I believe in these couple of things, and I will work with anyone, whether they have a D or an R by their name, as long as they're going for these couple of things: individual liberty, financial liberty, making sure we're not overtaxing or overprinting, making sure that the local communities, and this has been the big one that has a broad appeal with the inner cities that I've been talking to, is the local control, making sure that local communities can dictate things that will be solutions for them. And I think that's a classic, like you said, that's a classic tenet of the Republican Party that they've gotten away from, that I think should be appealing to. On the other side of the street, what I have to deal with is people have an instant reaction to both my gender and my race, aside from being a Republican, if I'm being frank, when I go in the inner cities. And they make presuppositions about who I am and what I might believe. And so...
What kind of...
Well, you know, it's the same stuff that
what the brothers and sisters saying?
I had one person ask if I was lost, if I'm selling something, if I had, and so once they get it, like I'm a political candidate, they were like, well, you don't look like any Democrat I see. And I said, well, I'm a Republican. And then they'll tell me they've never talked to a Republican.
I haven't seen it.
Right. And these are whole neighborhoods. I'm knocking the block.
Well, we've seen them, but they're generally speaking not nice people.
Well, I see I'm trying not to, so I called out this part of it. So there's a portion of, and I've called them out consistently, and I can tell you, conservatives, real Republicans are tired of it. Because I say these
tired
things,
of what?
Fake people who claim to be conservative and espouse conservative values, and then go to Washington and they do nothing they're just more populist, and they're more concerned about getting reelected and maintaining power vacuums. And I can say, and that's both sides of the aisle, and I feel no problem calling both sides of the aisle of saying, what is your, like, if you were to sit, and I don't want to name names because that's what we get, you can name names, this is your truth. But when we sit them down,
you got to work with them.
I do have to work with them.
I don't have to.
But I say, what is your philosophy? What is your ideology? What is holding you accountable to the people? And there's nothing. There's just whatever the vote, like if a poll comes in that this is probably, we're going to go that way. And we've got to get away from that. What are the actual solutions? Fix schools, fix jobs. You do those two things, and then you have other social programs you do have to fit. Like, obviously I have the police thing on there, and I have different social programs on there, but I don't think you can do anything without an educated workforce and without without industry on the other end to greet them and meet them.
All right, we're going to look at your flyer.
Okay.
Check out your flyer. Can we put the flyer up so everyone else at home that are watching on Facebook Live and YouTube, where you guys should be following me right now? I'm trying to get to YouTube up, so that's what we're doing. Okay, we got it up, hopefully. You say fix our schools, and school selection for parents, and fight the hidden curriculum. What is, and then you have hidden, like, with those quotation marks on it. I can tell right now it's very evil because you have the quotation marks. Yeah.
Well, it's not
like,
inherently.
It's like fight the hidden curriculum.
So
this curriculum's so bad that they have to hide it. So what is that?
So let me go through the first. So school selection. The biggest thing that I see when I look at our schools, and this is where I've spent most of my time, is if you're the poorest neighborhoods get the worst schools, right? Because of the way the property tax is set up. And so if you're born poor, you're probably going to die poor because of the poor state of our system.
Whoa, that's not American for you to say that.
I know it isn't, but it's true. And here's some other two things.
It is true.
No, but there's these other two groupings that we have to acknowledge.
It is true.
In early education specifically, it goes against males. Because education is geared towards being compliant, memorization, and literacy. And females strive at those three, being compliant, following rules, reading, and these things. We know males struggle because they are more creative thinkers, they're more kinesthetic learners, especially early, and we know this disproportionately affects poor young men and young men from single homes. And then the third piece is with the way we do college selection, it's biased against minorities. And so you have these three impediments. And if you're in one of those buckets, right, if you're poor, it's already set up against you. If you're poor and a younger boy from a poor neighborhood, now you got two. And if you're a young boy from a minority, now all three. And I can sit here and speak to some of these, right? I grew up poor and I grew up as a boy, and I can sit here and go, oh, especially now that I've studied education, I'm like, look, it's messed up. We should do blah, blah, blah. But we don't have anyone in our communities advocating because they don't really understand, because everybody goes to school and they say, well, they're doing it the way I do it. That must be the best way. And so you end up poor kids end up born poor. They go through a bad school system that's not made for them and not going to make them successful. So where are they going to be? They're going to die poor. And it's this cycle. You don't break that. Let parents pick any school they want. Let parents go to Highland Park. Let them go up to the private schools that are going to be the best for the parents know what's best for their kids, whether it's private education, charter education. Let's get more. And the reason I say that is you're going to get more and more schools, progressive schools, classical schools. We try and do this one size fits all, and we get the same results over and over, which is that for especially these three big groups, they're not made for this factory model. And yet we're just, and I would say this in admin meetings at schools, and they'd be like, yeah, well, it's just like opportunity. It's just a loss. It's like grocery stores. It's like, well, there's going to be some stealing. It's like, well, we're just going to lose boys and minorities and poor people. So, but we can work around it.
All right.
So that's the first, and then the hidden curriculum. So there's, I know I'm doing this. There's 5 curricula in school. There's the overt, which is what we say we're going to teach, math, science, right? And then there's the covert or hidden. There's stuff that we talk about, but we don't necessarily post it online. And then there's stuff like null curriculum, the stuff we choose not to teach. We've a lot of stuff in the inner cities. When I go and teach those Title I schools, that was the big gripe with history books. What the null curriculum, right? Not necessarily the hidden, what we're not saying, but what we've removed from history books and are choosing not to teach, or science books, or what have you. And then so we have all these different curricula. And most parents, and so I say fight that, I use fight because it sounds great and it looks good on a push card. But really what I would want to say is make sure parents are informed about the type of school and education their kids are getting.
And your doctorate is in what?
In education.
That's
why I get so hyped. I could do 20 minutes just on this. Yeah.
I can tell. So Angelo, let's play some drops. Let's leave all of the other political drops alone just for this week. We're just going to go straight with Dr. Rodgers in his neighborhood, and we're going to talk in a minute about reviving our economy, because I just got my credit score into the 700s, and I was able to buy a tank of gas today. So we'll see you guys on the flip side of these drops. Thank you. Who was that masked man? You mean you don't know? That was no masked man. That was the commish. Saturdays from 5 to 6 p.m. on the Fishbowl Radio Network.
Hi, this is Howard Scott from The Howard Scott Show, coming to you from beautiful Arlington, Texas on Fishbowl Radio. You can catch me every Wednesday from 6 to 7, and we play all this war music, and you get to hear some of the songs that I wrote when I was in the band War, how I created the songs, the stories behind it, and we start off with the blues. You have a good time talking to me, so tune in every Wednesday from 6 to 7 and catch The Howard Scott Show. We're having a whole lot of fun on Fishbowl Radio. Jump in.
All right, back again, and you've been listening to the Fishbowl Radio, Fishbowl Studios. We're no longer a radio. Radio's so passe. We don't do radio no more. No more radio. We're in podcasts now. That's what we're doing. But you know what we're doing is we're trying to revive the way in which we are talking and communicating to people. And one way that Dr. Rodgers wants to revive our economy. And I cracked a joke about credit scores being what they are and able to get gas. Inflation is high, man. You get elected, what you gonna do, man?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to limit the things that cause inflation, which the biggest one right now is printing money we don't have. And we can't just print money that's not creating actual wealth. And so that's the first one. Then you limit the excess spending. We spend so much on things that don't actually benefit.
Such as what?
Well, I mean, we just spent another $30 billion on the war in Ukraine, on top of the $10 billion we already sent them.
You don't think we need to spend money?
I'm saying that we're spending $1 billion just on translators is a lot of money, and I would ask what those same funds, because the original ask was $33 billion, right? And so all they did was go back and say we need another $7 billion for balancing this out, whereas if the White House at Biden saying we only need 33 and Congress is giving an extra $7 billion, what would that $7 billion, what would $1 billion do for Dallas, and Dallas communities and going back into those reviving economies? So try and keep as much of the spending on point as possible and specified. And these getting away from pork bills would help, but going into specifically into Dallas. So I'm big into opportunity zones.
What's the opportunity zone?
So opportunity zones, I had somebody.
I saw an opportunity zone, and the first time I saw it was a sign that says, "Welcome to the South Dallas Opportunity Zone." And when I saw that, that was 1983. And it had, "Welcome to the South Dallas Opportunity Zone. President Ronald W. Reagan, Ronald Wilson Reagan." I said, wow, we have opportunity in South Dallas. Now, I go into South Dallas now. "Welcome to the Opportunity Zone. President Joseph R. Biden." They just take what's the opportunity zone?
Well,
And how come there's no opportunity in fixing it?
well, so there's two key points in that. I can't speak to the one that happened in '83 because depending on what time of year it was, I wasn't born yet. But
Fair enough.
But what it essentially boils down to,
Should have been born earlier.
I should have been. But the whole point is, you have rich people,
Right.
We have wealthy people in this country, and they do not want to pay taxes. And more important to not wanting to pay taxes, just like any of us, they also want to make more money, just like any of us. And so assume that, and assume that they're going to go put their money anywhere they can that avoids, someone else taxing them and allows their money to grow. And so what you do is you set up opportunity zones. Instead of putting your money in the Cayman Islands, instead of hiding your money overseas, put it in the neighborhoods of most need. Now, the big catch here, because I've done a lot of reading on this, and I don't try and present, especially any government solution, as a perfect solution. The big catch, and I've stressed this on
If you're a Republican, you'd say that is not the solution for the government to be involved in it at all.
Right, but I also don't want to sit here. Can we sit here and say that District 30 is where it needs to be? Right? Is it thriving? Is it growing? So what I'm doing is proposing a system where, and this is why the Republicans like it, it's essentially a removal of government. It says if you put your money in these places that are in the most need and you create non-gentrifying jobs, and I want to stress this piece because this is where it's gotten into trouble. If I can just be honest here, right? Because we're having an honest conversation. Non-gentrifying industry. So the big reason was people were just going in, buying up poor people's houses, putting in an apartment complex, and you've raised the property value. You didn't actually create jobs, right? Or you tear down a poor person's home and you build in, these McMansions, right? So they have to actually be industry. And so the best way this is done, and this is why Tim Scott's revival was a little different, is you're focusing on actually, instead of bringing the money in, you give the money directly to the local communities. The big gripe I have here is that Houston got 3 times, so that brought in, $5 billion to Texas in the first year. Houston got 3 times as much of that money as we did, right? I think Dallas, I don't know about you, between the Cowboys, between the airport, Six Flags, I think, and Dallas is 10 times as good as Houston. Houston is just traffic and the smell of oil. They should not be getting as much industry money, tax breaks as us, nothing. Dallas should be getting 10 times what they get. Let's bring it in, let's invest into these poor communities, create jobs, non-gentrifying industry so that people can graduate from these schools and have something to look forward to that's not, like I said, the cycle of poverty.
Okay. Well, this is fast paced. I want to go to the flip side. Let's go to the flip side of his flyer, and let's look at that. Enact the Second Step Act.
Yes.
Empower our community. What's the second step, and how come the first one didn't act?
No, the first. So the First Step Act was under the Trump administration, was the prison reform, and it was bipartisan. Got huge reviews from both sides of the aisle, because I think most people with half a brain would have said there's a problem with our prison systems, and there are just some basic things that we can do.
There's too many people in our prison system.
Right, and they're not focused on, and this is a big piece I was talking about with the Second Step Act, is and I'll get to that.
Well,
I'm getting out of
well, let me say this to your Republican people, okay?
Okay.
I said there was too many people into it, I know Republicans, generally speaking, like lock them up. Because I hear it all the time, and normally they say they were talking about Hillary Clinton, but that's beside the point.
Yeah.
Proceed.
Yeah, so look at the Second Step Act would be building off that, which is what can we do that's a bipartisan solution to looking at police enforcement and what that looks like going forward into the future. And so I talked to social justice and community groups. I talked to police groups. And if I'm being very honest, I stole Tim Scott and Cory Booker had a plan that was very close to being passed as bipartisan legislation. Ed, I don't mind telling you, I copied and pasted like any good teacher and student does. And so what it says is we need improved funding for the police, not defunding. And that means improved, focusing specifically on training, making sure, and recruiting. Because I talked to the police and the community groups, getting young kids, because the whole thing, right? What are the police, right? Police was in Athens. They were the polis, the men of the polis, the people who could be trusted to help guard the community. And we've gotten away from that. We've gotten away to where they're now outside forces who go into neighborhoods to secure it. And I lived in the South Bronx, and when
You put the camera angle on us now,
Okay.
Angelo.
When I lived in the South Bronx, I get out on the Upper East Side, and there's a cop that looks.
You lived in the South Bronx?
I did, but I lived on the Upper East Side too.
Okay.
So when I lived on the Upper East Side, I get out, the cop, as soon as I get to the street corner, there's a cop, and he looks like me, and at the next corner, there's a cop, and he looks like me, and he acts like me. When I worked in the South Bronx, there's that same cop that looks like me, but he doesn't look like anybody else in the neighborhood. And he looks, to be honest, terrified, and he has no kind of way to talk, and cultural assimilation is not a thing. The people of the neighborhood should be policing the neighborhood. So we recruit, we train, and then we got to retain, because we're losing so many people. It's the same problem. When I talked with the police, it's the same problem that I saw with schools, in that teachers, they have all these teachers and cops, right, who are working in an antiquated system. And when things go to heck, who do we blame? Either the teacher or the cop, when we're not looking at what's the big issue that underlined that led to this, right? And again, it goes back to these things. So a Second Step Act, improve funding, get more community hires, get more interaction between the community and the police, get it back down. This should be a slam dunk, and that's why I did the second step, hoping people would be interested in another bipartisan. Again, Cory Booker and Tim Scott, they're a Republican and a Democrat. It seems like something we should be able to reach across the aisle.
And that's what you have me looking them up on that. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're about to get ready to go to a close. I'm going to ask you one more question.
Okay.
You say it's protect our border.
Yes.
Please explain.
Yeah, so I think this is a really personal issue for me. My wife is an immigrant, and she came to this country, and I hear her and I talk.
Where's she from?
She's from the Dominican Republic, and so she, to come to the country, did the waits in line, takes the test, memorizes the Constitution, pays that money. And the question is, why should she do that? Why should she do that when others can just cross and just come in? And the second piece to that is, well, that's not right. And the second piece, my father-in-law couldn't even come to our wedding because our visa program is so backed up. And so I have this same conversation. There's no one on either side of the aisle that says our immigration system is where it needs to be. The Democrats tend to focus on the people that are already here in the country and how you can activate that. I think Republicans focus more on the border, and I think the reason is, and I'm for comprehensive reform, and so the first step is the border, just because you can't fix anything if it's a bum rush. And I think this is definitely something that appeals to the inner city, because when you have illegal immigration, they're going to flood and they're going to fluctuate, that should be a better word, fluctuate, to big cities, because that's the easiest.
That's where the jobs are.
Those where the jobs are. And so when you create unnecessary competition for jobs and dollars, or unnecessary strain on school systems in the inner city, and it's not saying not have immigrants. That's not what we're saying. It's secure the border, push everybody to the ports. Then that's the second piece you got to fix there is our ports are a mess. You can't just hand someone a ticket. We have asylum laws for a reason. If someone's coming here because they need to get asylum, we need to get them in the country. And if somebody is dangerous or a human trafficker or whatever, we don't want them in the country.
So you're saying you for asylum?
Well, yeah, we have asylum laws for a reason. I'm not for blanket asylum. I am for people who apply for asylum at the ports of entry, and I want a system where they get in quicker.
So most of the people from Central America, they would say they're asylum seekers. Would you be for them coming in?
Not if they can't prove that there's a threat to their life. Because for me, I think the fear is, and I don't want this to be played as the fear is like, I'm not afraid of this, obviously. It's the worry comes from not a place of xenophobia, but it's just economics, right? We're in a recession. I'm betting that the information is going to come back and show that we've had GDP shrinking for consecutive quarters now. We know inflation is through the roof. We know that we have a global disease we're still trying to get our hands on, and yet we can have just anyone come across, we can have anyone come up here and seek for jobs, and if they're just an economic migrant, that's okay. That's not a problem, but we need an orderly process. Or in the same way that you have a door at your house, right? You choose who comes in and who doesn't.
All right. And before we go to a close, I'm going to ask the question here that people are going to ask me. How come I haven't asked you this before?
Okay.
Trump.
Okay.
I mean, you got it from the NAACP.
You gotta get it. Yeah.
I know you did.
Yeah, I did.
But why'd you just set up like this? You just set up.
Because there's no, when I was in New York, and I would say I was a Cowboys fan, that was the react. They set up because, and that's what I'm saying. Trump is not unlike the Dallas Cowboys in that he is polarizing, and that there's not I've yet to meet someone who has, or very few people that have a middle ground opinion on him. So this is my take. I liked the first 3 years of what we got specifically with economics, and I thought the last year was pretty bad. Between the lockdowns, the mask man, all of these things were in the end futile and did nothing but hurt our economy. So I didn't like that. I did not think he handled the racial protests that in places turned to racial riots. I did not see a president step up and do that. And then the economy was tanking, and I heard more about election. So I'm being very fair as much as I can. I would not take any of the divisive rhetoric. I don't think it has a place in this country. I think you can get all of the good from the trade and economics, that the lowest unemployment rate in the African American community and the Latino community. You can get all of these things without being, for lack of a better term, inciting on people on Twitter and picking fights. I think you can do it just by explaining your position. That's as fair as I get. So I don't defend anything. So if you have a specific policy, I'll go there.
Oh no, Angelo's signaling for us that we're out of time, really. But there goes the neighborhood with the Trump statement. But so while we get ready to have you talk about your neighborhood, Dr. Rodgers' neighborhood, look into the camera there and tell us, the people of United States Congressional District 30, why we should elect you to be our Republican nominee for Congress. Go for it.
Thank you. So I think the biggest thing that we're looking for in the Dallas community is a sense of understanding, because there are all these blanket statements about where the country is headed and where the U.S. needs to go and what's going on with this president or that president, when really there are salient points that we should be making about our community. Dallas County and Dallas specifically has had a 1 in 5 poverty rate for over 30 years across 4 decades, and that's Democrat presidents, Republican presidents, Democrat Congress, Republican Congress. That's consistent failure of leadership, because other communities, your North Dallas and your West and all these others in the DFW and the Metroplex, they have gotten more prosperous. They have seen improvements, and they have seen the strides that our community deserves. And so I think that, I pitched this, my very first campaign statement, which was, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And Dallas County specifically has always, voted for a Democrat, and we have gotten that result. And I think that you lose nothing, and in fact you gain more by leveraging your vote towards an outsider who might have some new ideas and who might be more dependent on your vote and more willing to listen and not take you and your vote for granted, maybe skipping events and things like that. But yeah, I think it's got to be down to, do you feel like this person has the best intentions for our community, or is this just another outsider who's going to mismanage things and tell you that the reason why? So.
All right. Thank you for coming to the show, Dr. Rodgers, and explaining why you're running for Congress in the U.S. Congressional District 30, a very vast district. I'm sure that we'll talk later on as well. I would implore all of those people that are listening to us right now to please share it. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, EdGray1906. Where can they follow you at?
I'm at Dr. James B. Rodgers on Twitter, and James Rodgers for Congress on Instagram and Facebook, all those social media platforms.
All right. And last but not least, if you like what you see, donate right up there on that rolling screen right there. Donate up there for Cash App, Great Vision 2020. And Great Vision 2020 sounds good, doesn't it?
I like it.
So Great Vision 2020. And also keep in mind this is a paid political advertisement of the James Rodgers for Congress. And you can contact him, P.O. Box 94?
84.
84.
84, yeah.
84, Lancaster, Texas. Or as some people refer to it, Lancaster, Texas. But that being said, thank you for tuning in to the Commish Radio Show. And remember to get out and vote. This is the first day of early voting. And we will see you guys back here on Saturday. Thank you for tuning in.